What if I told you one of the most defining moments in African American culture followed slavery? A time period that changed art, music, poetry, literature, all in one. Told by some historians as amazing, due to the ability of African Americans to overcome slavery while in the face of poverty, ignorance, terrorism, and subjugation, still deeply woven into their lives. Yet still being able to take on a much higher plane of intellectual and artistic consideration, the integration of both white and black people, and the introduction of black urban societies with greater economic opportunities. The Harlem Renaissance set the stage for the civil rights movement, and so much more.
The Harlem Renaissance was almost a direct result of the Great Migration. The mass exodus of African Americans from the rural South to the urban North created the conditions for this artistic movement. While this creative explosion took place all across the nation, it is named for the Harlem neighborhood in Manhattan, which preceding this had rapidly turned from a white neighborhood into a kind of black city within New York. The Harlem Renaissance had a profound impact on literature, art, music, as well as later civil rights movements. The poetry and literature of the time may be the largest aspect of the Harlem Renaissance. Some of the most famous poets to come from the Harlem Renaissance are Langston Hughes, Claude McKay, and Georgia Douglas Johnson. According to the Poetry Foundation, they all had one main idea in common. They sought to explore black life, both the beauty and the hardships. All three, along with many others, wanted to redefine themselves and their community for more than what white stereotypes of them were at the time. Poetry and literature from the Harlem Renaissance widely varied. McKay used cultural poetry forms, such as a sonnet, and often included radical messages of resistance. Meanwhile, Hughes would often bring black cultural creations into their work, meaning they would have rhythms of genres such as jazz in their poems. The Harlem Renaissance also impacted visual art. Black artists of the time explored issues of race through their work. One such Harlem Renaissance artist was Aaron Douglas. Here is his painting titled The Founding of Chicago. It portrays shackled African American workers gazing at the rising city of Chicago. This painting protests the overlooking of the role that black workers played in the building of American cities. Other Harlem Renaissance artists included Louis Milo Jones and Jacob Lawrence. The largest contribution to music from the Harlem Renaissance was jazz. While jazz was not solely a product of the Harlem Renaissance, it had beginnings before 1920. Jazz was hugely influenced by it. In fact, the period in the 20s and 30s in which the Harlem Renaissance occurred could also be referred to as the Jazz Age. One artist from this time was New Yorker Duke Ellington. This is his piece, I Must Have That Man, recorded in 1928. It is a classic medium swing jazz piece, which incorporates both parts of European and African music. Overall, the Harlem Renaissance was a massive creative explosion of black literature, music, and visual art. It strove to remake the image of the black race and increase the support for racial equality by putting black creative works in mainstream culture. In this way, the Harlem Renaissance helped influence the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s.